today's video is, I think it's video 5 in the series now, of perspective drawing, 3D drawing, particularly to help you to communicate any design ideas. Now, we did one point perspective drawing early on, and we then ran through various sort of versions of 2-point perspective. We're going to continue 2-point perspective today. You're going to need, if you haven't got it already, a long ruler and a drawing pencil. Ideally, a couple of drawing pencils in case you need to, in case one breaks, and then a couple of colouring pencils, ideally for the end. Okay, so the really key bit is the long ruler and the pencil. So I'll just give you a little preview of what we're doing today. It's an interesting one. It's actually I hesitate to use the words really difficult because it isn't really difficult. You're going to have to follow the rules of perspective. But let's get started. So we've done 1-point perspective. There's our vanishing point. We then did a chair, exactly the same chair in 2-point perspective using vanishing point 1 and vanishing point 2. And we looked at projecting backwards and forwards. Then we did 2-point perspective with vanishing point 1, vanishing point 2, and we projected backwards and forwards again. This time we started to divide space by going from corner to corner to find halves, and we talked about how you can kind of continually divide that space to work out your proportions and quarters and eighths and sixteenths, etc. Then what we did is we did a slightly more careful representation of a storage box like you might come up with as a part of your GCSE project. And there's our 2 vanishing points again. I've talked to you about being slightly deliberate in making our views quite extreme in terms of foreshortening. So where it's closer to us, it's larger. Where it's further away, it's smaller. Gives a little bit of visual impact. And today we're going to be doing an exploded drawing. So if we took an object like this lower part of the storage area there, we're going to explode it. Now, I've taken a little bit more time on my preview today because there are a few measurements that we need to get absolutely right. And I've kind of ummed and ahed about how to do this. I'm not going to do any wood joints or any connections today. I'm just going to literally show you the method of exploding outwards. Now, exploded drawings are used to explain features of design ideas. So if you're a designer or an engineer who's making a product out of a number of components, which most objects are, you often need to show what the relationship, how those components fit together properly. So we're going to do that today with an exploded view of a storage box. Now, you know, if you're a bit picky, this isn't entirely accurate. I haven't done lots of measuring on this because I'm not showing wood joints. I'm not getting a true representation. I'll give you an example of that. If these 2 components were to go into that box, they would actually knock into each other and they wouldn't fit together properly. If they were to just fit on the outside faces, you would end up with a step. So it's not entirely accurate, but it's a beginning point to help us get this correct. So I've done the red box in the middle. We're actually going to start by drawing this box today, the red box. And it's really important that we get our distance between the left-hand edge and that front corner correct, and that we get our vanishing points at the same position. Because what I was checking when I did this drawing really is when these 2 panels are pushed outwards, whether or not they would disappear off the bottom of the page. So if they do start to do that, don't worry about it. It still works. It just makes the rest of your drawing a little bit harder. But getting that measurement right was actually quite important for getting that to still sit on the page. That's all it is. Okay, so if I tell you what those measurements are, when we're constructing our drawing, we're going to come down to 70 mil there, and we're going to come down 70 mil there. We're going to come down 70 mil for our vanishing point here, and we're going to come down 70 mil for our vanishing point there. So that's VP1 and VP2. I'll just write that in. So if I'm talking to you about that. And then we're going to come down on the bottom of the page for our front corner. Remember, in 2-point perspective, I'm often drawing from my front corner. It's not the only way to do it, and that is, fortunately, reasonable guess, we'll do that at 110 mil. That's 11 centimeters. 11 centimeters, and that gives us our bottom edge. Okay, and then there'll be a bit of measuring to get our heights right. We're going to be a little bit more precise potentially today. All right, so let's do that on my drawing. So it's 70, and then 70, and then 110. So next thing, I'm going to draw a line up my page. If you look at my drawing, I'm at the moment I'm working below my eye level line. All of this is below where I'm looking, so I'm looking down on it. I'm going to draw a line up that's going to form this front corner. We'll then measure that distance, which is 18, and that distance, which is 60. So 18 and 60. So I'm going to just check again. If you've got a set square at home and you can measure your 90 degrees, that's better. But I'm doing it with minimum equipment here, so I'm not going to get a set square out. So I'm drawing up the page a bit. Really light line. I think your construction lines are important today. So there's my line. Very, very difficult to see. And then I said to you I was coming up by 18. And then from that mark, 60. 18. If that was 20, it probably wouldn't matter. I'm just going to work off my drawing then. That ended up being 18 there. Okay. So this is the front corner, if you remember, of the red box. And from that, we've got that measurement, we've got that measurement. Most of the other measurements we're going to know, with the exception of this one here, which we'll measure at the time at it's about 75. And that will allow us to plot our box. So again, we're going to be coming out from this. So I do want you to do your construction lines as lightly as you possibly can. But you go from each of your 2 points to each of your 2 vanishing points. Okay, so if you've got that right, if you've been really precise, remember, make sure you're hitting your vanishing points. Don't just go in the general direction. Now we're going to plot back in that direction from that top corner, and that was 85 along that line, and we're going to come along the front line 45. So we've got 85 and 45 we'll measure. So from that top corner, I'm doing 85. And from that top corner there, I'm doing 45. Right, now again, we're going to be doing lines parallel with that front corner. So check your line carefully. You could get your pencil, put it there, get the 2 lined up. Nice light lines, please. Don't forget, because we're going to be projecting from these corners. So don't get carried away and do really dark ones. Okay, so now that's the basic box measured. I'm going to go from this point here to VP1. I'm going to go from that point there to VP2, so the opposite vanishing points. And most of you should be getting pretty confident if you've followed the other tutorials about how to construct a basic box. It's worth practicing. Okay, so that's what we're projecting out for. So at the end, there's my red box at the end. I don't really want to see that middle box. I've left the red one in so that you can see it, and it might be a good visual thing for you to do if you want to. But that's actually going to disappear in our drawing. So we'll crack on, and we'll start by doing projecting forwards and getting these 2 corners right, I think. So what we're going to do, we're going to line up with VP2, we're going to line up with that corner, and we're going to push forwards in that direction. And we're just going to do the front corners for a minute. So that line already exists, so I'm not going to go over it again. So I'm going to push forward that way a bit. And then I'm going to do the same in the opposite direction from VP1, from that corner, I'm going to push forward a bit. So that's going to give us this section here and that section there. So I chose a particular point to measure from, to draw it to make sure it fitted. That's 15 millimeters. And then that is 1 centimeter-ish. It's probably about 9. Realistically, it's 9 mil, isn't it? But if you did it as a centimeter, it would probably still work. So that was, those two measurements are 15 and 10 mil. That's what I'm going to do. So from that corner of our box, come in this direction. There's my 15. That's my mark. And then a further 10. Okay, so that bit, I'm going to just darken that little bit in between those two lines so you can see it. That's going to be the top corner of that face. Okay, and then what we'll do is we're going to come and do the same thing over here. That one is 12 and 8. 12 and 8. So you go to that corner. It's 12. That's 8. All right. So again, I'll just darken the top of that in so you can see where I'm going with that. Right. So what we're going to now do is we're going to plot down to create the front face here and the front face there. So those are going to just be vertical lines. I'm going to run them right off the bottom of the page. That's absolutely fine. And we'll be using this red bit here to chop them off. So let's just draw from each of those 2 points, there and there, straight down the page. Again, this is one of those ones where you check that you're 90 degrees off the page, or vertical remains vertical. Checking against that line. That's one. And then here's our 2 again. So from each of those. This is probably the one, if your ruler's covering your line, it's probably the one you need to check a little bit that you get it parallel, because again, if it's not parallel, it looks a bit weird. Right, so in terms of how do we then work out the distance? Wherever we can avoid doing actual measurement, you'll see I've ended up with like 12s and 8s and 9s and stuff. If we can plot off a shape or project off a shape, that gives us a much more precise object. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to take the bottom edges of that cuboid in the middle, and I'm going to use that by projecting forwards. So although they come from VP2, we've already got a line there that we can use. So I'm going to line up with the line. And I only need it within the shape. I'm going to try and start minimizing my lines. I'm getting quite a lot now. So I've drawn that in there. I'm going to do the same thing within the other one. So I'm lining up with the bottom of the shape there. I'm projecting through. I'm darkening in. So I've only just managed to stay on the page there. It's all right, doesn't matter. And then these 2 faces are our keepers. So I'm going to just darken those in so that you can see them. You don't have to darken them in at this stage, but for me it just helps when we're separating our lines out, when our eyes are getting a bit tired. Okay, and then we're going to project from there back to the vanishing points, from each of these top corners and bottom corners, back to the vanishing point. Now these need to be light at first. Because we'll chop them afterwards. A little bit of precision here is important, because it's very easy to spoil a good drawing by kind of being approximate at this point, because we're not doing a sketch drawing, we're doing a sort of a technical drawing. We need to make sure that we're following each of our lines very precisely. So you know, if your pencil's getting a bit blunt, stop and sharpen it. If you're drawing too heavily, Take a bit of pressure off. Keep checking that you go into the vanishing point, and the same point on the vanishing point. I mean, I'm noticing that my lines were creeping out there where I was going a bit quick or talking. Okay, so we've now got these two faces. Hopefully you can distinguish them. They're infinite. They go off forever. So we've got to decide where we chop them off. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the back edge and the front edge. Sorry, the back edge here and the back edge there to chop them off. So we literally, let's do the left-hand one first of all. Follow that line, follow that edge. It's going to come over here, isn't it? So I'm only going to draw between those two lines. That's there. Do the same on this side. I'm checking that line. And then I just go between those two lines. Okay, so there's the two lines that I've just drawn. And then, quite simply, I'm going to come to the bottom edge of each of those shapes. So make sure you know where your bottom edges are. And you're going to come straight down vertically, making sure you're parallel with your front edges from just this end point. I'm not doing both. If I was making it a transparent shape, I'd maybe do both. Or if I was plotting in it, I'd maybe do both. But I'm just doing the outside edge. So there's our shape. Now I'm going to darken this one in. Sometimes it's worth stepping back from your drawing if you're struggling to see where it is. It's worth stepping back and checking that you know where your sort of keepers are, your finished edges. You can also hold a drawing up into the mirror, and that'll give you a bit of a sense of whether you're getting it right. That's quite a useful tip. Yep, so they're happy with that one. That's projected down and it's plotted down. So I'm going to do the same over on this one now. I'm going to come straight down, making sure that I'm parallel with all my other edges. I'm not doing the back edge, I'm just doing that front edge. So I'm checking for parallel. And then I'm going to darken my shape in. And once we've done these two, that's quite a lot of the drawing done, because we can use these now quite easily as a sense of how we do our back pieces. Okay, that was looking pretty good already, isn't it? You're beginning to get a sense of how that object might go together, or how if it was, one was slotted into another, it would work. So it looks pretty good. So we're going to now project backwards. We're going that way and we're going that way. And again, we'll stick with measurements to create these two panels. We'll be accurate. So I'm going to work from my red box. So that's this corner here. And we'll come back we'll come out that way as well. Sorry, I'm pointing off screen, I realise. We'll come off that way as well. So we're going to come back off here, and we're going to come back from there. So that one is 11, and that one is 8. So we've got 11 on the left and we've got 8. So if I look at my line, it's going to be 11 there and it's going to be 8 there. Okay. And that way was 8. Okay, so that was 11, that was 8. Now again, if you're not quite on it, it probably doesn't really matter, but 11 and 8. I'm going to now go from this one to VP2, and I'm going to go from this one to VP1. Okay, so I've now got that corner there, that corner there. We go to that vanishing point, we go to that vanishing point. So before I go any further, I'm going to darken the front edging. So again, if I'm looking at this, it's this corner, this edge here now, and this edge here that I'm going to do. So keep them vertical. If they happen to line up with any other corners, that's okay. If you're following the rules of perspective, so I'm looking at this one over here. Basically what I've done there is I've measured along and I've plotted straight down, and I've measured along and I've then plotted vertically to give us those back edges. All right, this is where I stepped away for a moment. It's made my eyes go, so I'm going to just refresh myself. So now we're going to come back that way and back that way from each of those two corners, and that'll define the whole depth of that shape. So let's look at this. It's going to be in the region of, 5 mil, 6 mil. So we'll just plot, there's my two corners. We'll just plot back there and there. So that was 6 mil and 6 mil. You know, they're approximately the same distance apart, so that makes sense that they're about the right size. Now, just to keep this simple, I'm going to darken that line in before I do anything else, in between those two, between the corner and the dot that I've just made. Okay, and then I'm going to now plot the top edge, which is this edge here. Face rather, and that top face. And I'm going to go up to my next set of lines, which will be from here. If you're starting to get kind of confused by it, just take a break for a minute, have a pause, maybe have a go over doing another sketch of it. But what we're looking at really is lines that cross other lines. And at no point am I deviating from my perspective lines on this. Sometimes you might plot between. If you're not going to a vanishing point or you're not going vertically, then you're probably going wrong. Right. So let's take this one here off to VP1. And that one there off to VP1 as well. Okay. And again, I'm just going to darken that in. So that's dark, that's dark, that's dark, and that's dark. That gives us our definition. So the only thing really I need to do now is to give my vertical faces. And if you remember, what we're doing here is we're making an object which replaces this red box. So although part of me is tempted to stop when I get to that line on my other drawing, I actually need to plot through a little bit further. Okay, and the same on each of those drawings. We're gonna plot vertically down the page, but we're gonna extend it past the original box that we drew. So it's actually going to come in down here. All right, so from that corner, I'm going to come vertically down really lightly. From this corner, I'm going to come vertically down. And then these two, we're going to come vertically down. And these are quite dark because they're going to stop when they hit that face there. All right, so next job. To get the depth of this, we actually need to think about how it comes off. We'll line it up with this corner here because that's the equivalent, that's the front and back. So we'll take that corner there, to define our back edge of this shape here. Okay, because in theory that depth is that depth, isn't it, when we come back in perspective? So we're using that front corner. Now again, I'm not taking any real account of thickness of material or how things fit together, but so if there's a little bit of an error, that's where that is. I'm doing this for visual impact. So if I plotted that, I'm not going to draw the line, I don't need that line there. It's going to come on that vertical line to that point. Now if you look at the distance, before I move my rule, if you look at the difference in height there, you can really see the effect of perspective happening. That's much smaller, but it is correct. So don't go, oh, that doesn't look right. It is correct. Go into there. I'm going to darken that little bit of line in there. So I'm just waiting for the thing to catch up. Right. So I'm now going to go from that vanishing point through the bottom of that point until I meet the next face. So I'm projecting through that point forward until I meet the next face. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. I'm going to just darken in that top edge, which is showing as quite light. And then the next one here, we can make a decision based upon, well, it would either be that edge there, or because of the view I've got, is this corner here, we're lined up with that, heading off to VP2. That corner to VP2 is going to be there. It happens to coincide with another line, but that's just a coincidence really. Okay, so I took that back corner, I plotted to VP2 to give me that line, and now from that point, from VP1, I'm going to project forward until I meet the next face. That gives me that point there. All right. Now, if you wanted to be a little bit clever about this and wanted to put a lid on it as well, you could do, and you would do that. I'm not going to do it in this drawing. You could project up from each of those corners there, straight up, to define where the lid might go. Now, remember, that would be a lid that's the same size as the box, so not totally accurate for a lid that would have an edge or a ridge or a shape to it, but. And you could do the same with the bottom, we could project down. But this is the end of this drawing, really. I'm going to put a bit of colour on it, just as a kind of finish to the same stage as we normally go to. But you can see how by plotting and using existing dimensions, such as that box, you can easily start to show the construction details of your object or of your product. Okay? And even if it was a more curved shape, once you're able to draw this and project through and you get that idea, it can really help you with your curvy and more organic shapes as well. But I'm sort of showing process here a little bit. So I'm going to add a bit of colour to that. Again, I'll speed that up probably. If you've managed to get that done, well done. That's quite a challenge. Try and do your own version of it. Think about how things fit on the page. So if you remember, my first task when I did my sort of sketch layout drawing was to make sure that my faces were going to fit on the page. Think about composition on the page a little bit. But you can always, if you go off the edge of the page, you go off the edge of the page. It's not the end of the world. Right, I'll do it. I put a bit of colour on it, it's all right. And I put a bit of a background on it to help it stand out. It doesn't really, the visualizer gives it a little bit of a shine to it, which is annoying. But if you were to show that on a design sheet, then someone would have an understanding of what the relationship is between each of those parts, each of those components. And that would allow you to explain maybe how you're making decisions around joining or the materials that you've used. Maybe we'll look at some point at doing some rendering where we look at how we represent different materials. I'm using basic colouring pencils here because I think those are a good starting point. You've probably got a couple of colours with you wherever you go. I'm deliberately not using a full set of colours. I'm also very tempted when I do this to get my drawing pens out and maybe do some sharp lines with a drawing pen. Equally, doing highlights using sort of white to show some reflection on there and stuff like that. I'm keeping it relatively straightforward because actually this is about perspective drawing more than anything else. Now, obviously, computers can do this for you, and that's great. But I think once you get your eye into doing perspective and you practice it, you stop having to rely so much on your drawing tools and you're able to sketch more confidently. And it's really about sketching and communication. That's what this perspective drawing is about. I mean, I would probably be able to reasonably confidently produce a perspective type drawing without really following the absolute rules. And if I was talking to someone in a cafe about my designs, I'd be able to use those same techniques to have a description, have a conversation and talk about how the product fits together because I'm confident with perspective. And I'm confident with perspective because I've done it so many times. So this is literally about practice and sort of getting to grips with a method which enables you later on to sketch without all the measurement and without all the lines potentially. But then if you need to be more accurate for a presentation drawing, you can drop back into that level of precision. But for me, this is about opening up the opportunity for sketching for you guys. All right, so good luck with that. If you get that done, brilliant. If you want to put a base on it and a lid on it, even better. That would really extend your ability. But if you get as far as that, or even something that looks pretty close to that, and you've used projecting out of a shape, then happy days. Well done. So good luck. Have fun.